All right. My name is Churilo, and welcome to our webinar this week. And today we are going to be talking about the differences between open source Milvus and Zilliz Cloud. I'm your host, and we are really fortunate to have my friend and solution architect here at Zilliz, Jay, who's actually going to be doing most of the talking. As I mentioned a few seconds ago, we are recording this session. After cleanup, I'll upload it and then send everybody the link. If you have any questions, please post your questions in the Q&A or the chat panel, and we'll answer them as they come in. And then we'll also reserve some time at the end. And I'm happy to open any lines. So if anybody has like some really, long questions, tough questions, cool questions, stuff to share, like I said, Jay really loves hearing from everybody and helping people out. That's really his specialty. So with that, I'm going to stop talking. Let's hand the mic over to you, Jay.
Cool. Thanks, Chris. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're doing really well. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Zilliz Cloud, which is our managed service offering. Milvus has quickly become the most widely adopted open source, highly scalable vector database solution, out there in the world. And, we just want to make people aware that there is a managed solution to Milvus, and there's quite a bit of differences as well. It's not just a lift and shift of Milvus. So we're just gonna go over some of the cloud offerings that we have, some of the products that we're offering as part of the commercial solution, and then we'll talk a little bit about the differences between Milvus and Zilliz today, and then at the end, I'll leave some time for Q&A if you guys have specific questions. But before we start, Zilliz, it's not just us. Yeah, I think, there's a lot of folks out there, a lot of experts that have kind of studied this space in detail, and, have essentially determined that we're really the leaders in this space. We definitely have a very mature, well thought out, and well implemented horizontally scalable vector database solution that is infinitely customizable, and we're seeing that through enterprise adoption and all the folks that need that billion, 10 billion, tens of billions kind of vector space use case. There really is no other option, and we're really proud of this. So. Right now we have three kind of main offerings. We have the Milvus open source, which a lot of you are probably familiar with, and then we also have two commercial offerings. We have Zilliz Cloud, which is a fully managed SaaS product, and we also have a hybrid product that we call BYOC, or Bring Your Own Cloud, where the data and control planes are fully bifurcated. So the data plane would live in your VPC, and the control plane would live in our VPC, and this allows us to provide a managed service-like experience while having you maintain full data sovereignty and custody in your infrastructure. And this is really, really popular for people who have strict regulatory compliance requirements, or they just for a lot of reasons. A lot of enterprises like to keep a lot of their data in their own infrastructure, and that really is an impediment to adopting a lot of the benefits that you would get from a managed service. And we want to provide customers that have that requirement an opportunity to leverage a lot of the Zilliz Cloud products without having to lose the sovereignty and custody of their data, which they think is very important to them. Like I mentioned, Zilliz Cloud is not just a lift and shift of Milvus. There are a lot of quality of life improvements, that we've made, to kind of make the highly scalable, vector database experience like a lot easier to use, and make it accessible to more people. The main one being the Cardinal index engine, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. We've made a lot of under the hood improvements to all the mainstream approximate nearest neighbor index types, and created a nice and easy to understand abstraction layer so that users could get the best trade-offs without having to necessarily know about all the underlying index details, right? And you also get a cloud native database, and all the features that come with a world-class enterprise grade managed database service. We support all three clouds, AWS, Azure, and GCP, in many regions, in many availability zones. We support HA if that's something that's a requirement. Private link, private service connect, and all of the equivalents, and all of the clouds, so that all of the traffic between your microservices and Zilliz don't go over the open internet. And if there's anything in particular that you're looking for that just isn't covered by what we currently have, obviously we're open to talking about those as well. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about Cardinal, which I think is really exciting. It's definitely something that's really unique to Zilliz particularly. I won't go, this is a very dense slide. There's a lot of, there's a lot of information here. I won't go over all of them, but I will. If you're really interested in this stuff, we have a lot of really detailed documentation that is very excruciating in its detail. So if you want to nerd out about it, and there's a lot of really interesting things that we've done. But the main point that we want to drive here is that a lot of the vector database solutions out there have taken a mainstream ANN index type, and they made some modifications to it. Whatever they deem to be the correct latency versus recall accuracy trade-off. And so they'll take, disk ANN or HNSW or IVF flat or something off the shelf, and they'll tune it. They'll bring it in-house, they'll tune it, they'll make sure that it kind of fits whatever their requirements are for their particular vector database product, and they'll ship it. They'll ship it as a single product, and that's kind of what you get. You're just, they've made that trade-off ahead of time. And if you're adopting that product, that's just kind of what you get. And if it doesn't fit your use case, then you're kind of SOL, right? And as you know, with Milvus, the ANN index type is basically like infinitely customizable, right? Like that's kind of just one of the benefits that you get from using an open source database. You can just open the hood and just do whatever you need to do to get the correct trade-off or whatever use case that you have. And a lot of our users do that, and we think it's great. It's very interesting. A lot of customers have created all sorts of really interesting things under the hood, in kind of tuning the performance, to their specific use case. And a lot of great teams do that. But a lot of users just want to get up and running quickly, without having to weigh all the lower level trade-offs. And that's kind of what Cardinal does, right? So it intelligently looks at your workload, and it constantly tunes the index type to give you, a very balanced latency versus recall accuracy trade-off experience, for your particular access pattern and data. So it's really intelligent in that sense. And there's a lot of blending and a lot of like lower level optimizations that we've made to essentially make this a very hands-off experience for you, but have it be so that you don't have to weigh all these trade-offs and you're just kind of stuck in this like one, just area, and there's just no way out, right? Like, so it's very flexible in that nature. And a lot of customers really appreciate this just because it just kind of works out of the box, and there's just not a lot they have to do. And a lot of folks actually use Zilliz in that sense, right? But if you do want to customize the trade-off, the recall accuracy versus latency trade-off. You can also tune this yourself. We provide a very easy to understand abstraction that we call the level parameter. And this is just a parameter that you send with each query. So, you can send one query at one trade-off, another query, another trade-off, and there's no re-indexing that needs to happen. It's just kind of done on the fly. And so essentially the way it works is if you want to optimize for latency, you just pass an integer of 1. And then if you want to optimize for recall accuracy, you just pass an integer of 10. And that's kind of the range that you get. And it's a very simple abstraction, and you kind of take trade-offs in both directions. So we think it's great. There's a lot of folks that find this abstraction really helpful, just because there are certain queries where it's okay if it takes longer. I just want the highest recall. Like I want like 99% plus, right? And it's okay. I'm willing to take a hit on latency. So this is very helpful to folks that need to be able to create that like kind of on the fly trade-off, and that just isn't a possibility with a lot of the other solutions out there where you're just kind of fixed with a certain set of trade-offs that either you put there, or either the vector database vendor kind of made those decisions for you. So this is probably one of the flagship features of Zilliz, and we're really proud of it, and it's definitely something that is will enable a lot of use cases and a lot of quality and life improvements as well. But it'll enable a lot of use cases where I need it to work, and I don't really know anything about how ANN index types work. So it's definitely something that we're really proud of. Okay, so the next abstraction that we have in Zilliz Cloud is something that we call CU types, or compute unit types. And the best way to think about compute units is each one is, sort of this like infinitely horizontally scalable unit that allows you to index some surface area of searchable vector space, right? So each CU would allow you to search over some amount of vectors, right? And each CU type defines the concurrency and latency that you would get over that searchable vector space. So at the top we have performance optimized, which is generally reserved for high concurrency, ultra low latency use cases. You can think about user-facing pipelines, recommendation engines, fraud detection, KYC platforms that are doing, real-time fraud detection, like in their user funnel. Latency is obviously very important there, and concurrency is also very important. So that is our highest end CU type, and it's definitely something that a lot of customers who are interested in the maximum performance, it's really just a money no object exercise to get the best performance, for a vector database. And then in the middle, we have capacity optimized, which is honestly our most popular CU type. It's a very good balance between economics and performance. Very commonly used for RAG pipelines, semantic search, image similarity search, and you're talking P95s in the 100 millisecond or less range. It's still very fast. It's very very usable for a lot of different use cases, and it's a very good balance between the two, and we saw that one a lot. And at the other end of the spectrum, we have extended capacity, which is generally used for searching over colder areas of vector space. If you have billions or tens of billions of vectors and you have a very infrequent access pattern, and you can tolerate latency in the hundreds of milliseconds. We see this as a very popular, kind of use case as well for folks who have a ton of data, but aren't necessarily searching over it like very, very often, right? It's something that they're like, okay, it's there, it's great. Like I have a ton of data, and I just need to be able to search over it, but I'm not doing it like 100 times an hour, and I can tolerate a little bit of elevated latency. And again, all of these are just abstractions for users to kind of just get what they need, right? Based on the use case that they have. And if you're on Milvus, you would have to weigh like how many resources do I devote to query nodes, how many resources do I devote to data nodes, and in Zilliz Cloud we have these like nice three kind of buckets of abstraction where they all have their own performance and economic trade-offs, and and obviously our solutions team works very closely with customers to make sure that they're making the right trade-off and they understand like each of these CU types, what you get, what you don't get, and making the right solution for the use case that they have. Um, okay, so there are a lot of other really interesting features that we have as well in Zilliz Cloud. Again, I'm not going to go through all of this. We can send this to you later if it's something you're interested in. But metadata filtering is definitely a really common thing that we see a lot. I think it's honestly overused a lot in my experience to the point where like it's getting to the point where there's no point in doing an ANN anymore. But nonetheless, it's a very common use case where they need to isolate certain areas of vector space, and like I'm 100% sure it's this document type, or I'm 100% sure it's in this region, or I'm 100% sure it's this particular product category. Very common use case for metadata filtering, and there's just a lot of optimizations that we've made to essentially create the search experience that you would expect from a NoSQL database, right? For example, and you would get that in conjunction with an ANN search capability that's world class. So there's a lot. Obviously, on Milvus, there's a handful of index types that you can choose from. Obviously, you can implement your own. Going back to what I was saying earlier about it being open source, there's just it's infinitely customizable in that nature. But there's a lot of really interesting things that our team has done where we believe that this will fit 95+% of what people are using, and we get a lot of telemetry from our users as well. So we're kind of constantly seeing and evaluating and understanding like what people are doing, what types of filters they like to use, like what their access pattern looks like. And is it equality? Is it range? Is it floats? Is it integers? Is it strings? And all of these different data types and different types of filters, can basically make it so that we have to weigh what decisions to make, right, from an index build standpoint. So we do a lot of analysis there as well, and there's a lot of really interesting work that we've done to kind of again abstract this for the end user. Now, that being said, our solutions team generally gets involved if there's a very complex like metadata filter use case, and we kind of make sure that that you understand like, hey, this is a vector database. It's primarily used for ANN. Like, is there a way for us to kind of like, is this the correct solution for what you're doing? And that's kind of like where we start. But a lot of times, the correct solution is, yeah, I need to do a lot of metadata filtering. And in those use cases, we work with you very closely. We make sure that we're picking the right index type for each of the scalar fields that you're trying to filter over. And it's a very white glove type service. It's like we'll work with you to make sure that the performance and of course weighing the economics as well is a good balance for what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And again, it's not like you can't do this in Milvus. Of course you can, but it's nice to have the creators of the project there with you to make sure that we're creating the right experience for you and we're making the right trade-offs and it's kind of fitting within your budget as well. And just another, again, lower level thing, optimization that you get, only on Zilliz Cloud is, we like to leverage a lot of the different architecture types that are out there. ARM architecture, still relatively new, compared to the x86 market, in the data center market. It's still there, it's definitely available, but there are a lot of, underlying changes that need to be made in order to fully leverage a lot of the ARM architectures, and a lot of software is kind of moving in this area as well. Just given the adoption of a lot of the mobile platforms just being fully ARM based. But there's a lot of interesting things that we've done under the hood. And again, I'm not going to go through all this, but there's a lot of interesting things that we've done to make Zilliz very very performant in the ARM architecture as well as x86 if that's what you prefer to use. But there's just inherent benefits, cost benefits and other things that you get just from being on an ARM architecture. And again, these are all just reserved for Zilliz Cloud. And we obviously make this determination, but if it's something that you're definitely interested in, especially if you're in like a BYOC type arrangement, where you really want to run the data plane on Graviton. If you're on AWS, it's definitely something that you would get a much better level of performance if you use the Zilliz product. And again, we're always obviously there to help you kind of make sure that you're eking out the most performance for the infrastructure that you're paying for. Okay, so I talked a little bit about what you get, what you don't get, and the main real challenges that we see with people who are running Milvus at scale is definitely the amount of just overhead it takes to make sure that it's running correctly. There's a lot of choices that you have to make. There's a lot of dependencies. There's a lot of underlying individual components that need their own attention, right? There's a lot of bottlenecks that occur in between each of the Milvus services, but also in between all the dependencies as well. So making sure all of that is playing nicely and you're optimizing, for each of the, if you have a write heavy workload, for example, or a read heavy workload, for example, or if you have certain latency and concurrency requirements, making sure each of those components is correctly provisioned for each of those individual workloads, and making sure that you're not overpaying and you're auto scaling up when it's required, and auto scaling back down when it's not required. It ends up just being a lot of operational overhead for folks, and we see this a lot with Milvus customers. There are some enterprises that are okay with it. They have the team, they're okay with it, like they understand the code base, they're very very familiar with Milvus. They've made some, maybe they forked it, made some modifications, and they run it, and it's fine. But there's a lot of folks that are out there maybe who have smaller teams, and they're like, look, I just need an infinitely scalable vector database. I just need it to work all the time. And that's where Zilliz comes in, along with all the other benefits that I just mentioned. There's just a lot of just quality of life improvements that you get by just, the nature of just moving to a managed service. And again, this is more of a real world impact, right? Like, you want to focus if you're, a fast moving, nimble team. the speed is the most important thing for you. Like you don't want to be mucking around with the implementation detail of your vector database. It just needs to work so that your users get the experience that you're trying to deliver to them, right? And there's a lot of things that get in the way of that. And I think self-managing a Milvus EKS cluster is definitely one of those things. Okay, so I talked a lot about the differences. There's a lot of folks that are using Milvus today. This all looks great, Jay. Like, how do I move from my current Milvus installation to Zilliz? And the great thing is that the APIs are fully unified. So, all of your application logic and all the, if you're using PyMilvus already, there's just not a lot to do from the access pattern standpoint. There's a couple things around like index types and a handful of areas that need to change, but for the most part, you can keep your code pretty much unchanged. That's really great. It's very convenient for folks who want to make the switch, just because the endpoints are the gRPC endpoints are virtually the same. There's a handful of differences, like I mentioned, but those it's a very very low effort code change from an application logic standpoint. So there's two main ways. The first way is to open an endpoint on your Milvus installation, and we can just do the migration straight from your database. This is very popular if you're not making schema changes, you don't need to change it. You just want to do a straight migration, and you're able to temporarily turn off the writes so that we're able to get the database synced. And then once you're done, you can point all the reads and writes to Zilliz after you've confirmed that it's up and running. And this is great. We have documentation on this, and it's a very easy to use migration path for a lot of folks. The downside here is that occasionally like we get some security concerns around. We don't really want to expose this outside our VPC, which is a completely understandable concern. And to avoid that, we also offer a backup utility that you can use. And a lot of our customers, to be honest with you, use this path. We have the Milvus backup utility, which is an open source project that we maintain. You create essentially a backup of your entire Milvus database, and it goes into object storage. And you point Zilliz to that object storage, and we just do a mass parallel ingest of all the data. So these are the two ways. Honestly, the one that I see more often is the backup files. It's very common because you're in full control. Your data doesn't have to leave, and you can put it on object storage that you also own and control. So that's pretty much it. How did I do on time? Wow, 25 minutes. That was really quick. Um, I guess we'll open it up for questions now, Chris. I think I just flew through that.
Yeah, you kind of went, I don't know if you took a breath. So let's go back to the migration slide and talk a little more about that. So I've heard from a number of users that, they've intentionally picked a particular index or maybe a couple of them,
Yeah.
right? And they built their application around it. Maybe they've even done some of the hard work to, try to then make sure that, per query they can, switch. What happens when you migrate to Zilliz Cloud? Because you talked about this auto index. Like, what work is required for the user to be able to switch from, I don't know, HNSW, scan, whatever, to auto index?
Yeah, we get that a lot. I think, it's a little anxiety inducing for folks, who've kind of made that particular trade-off. They've picked HNSW for particular reasons because it has particular characteristics. In Zilliz, there's only one index type. It's the auto index. So that's what you get. And what we generally recommend is for folks to import their data and run the queries that they would normally run in a production environment and make sure that the recall and the latency is acceptable to them. And if it's not, we provide that level parameter, like I mentioned, where you can fine tune the recall. So if you need more recall, for example, you can tell the query engine, hey, I need more recall in this particular scenario, and then it'll kind of step you up in 1/10 increments to get you to the balance that you're looking for. And if you don't get it, like for example, if you're like pinned to the wall at 10 and it's still not enough, definitely reach out to us. That sliding scale that we have from 1 to 10 is definitely a simple abstraction that we've offered for folks to kind of be like a self-service way to tune the recall. but there's more that we can do under the hood. So, if it's not satisfactory, or if it's not, performing the way that you would expect it to, definitely, we're here to help, and you can reach out, and we'll be able to tune it for you.
So then in your experience, because you've seen a lot of these migrations now, like what are like the just the three best practices that you recommend that people do before they even turn on the migration? Like, is there
Yeah,
something they should think about? Is there something that they
sure.
should prepare for?
The
What is
the
some your recommendations?
the main thing that we see is you need to be able to turn off the writes, at least temporarily for a couple of hours. And if you're not able to do that, it gets a little bit tricky because we have to do this like syncing operation later. We technically do have the ability to do a real-time migration, but it is a little bit trickier. And our solutions team will probably get involved in that situation if it's a mission critical application and that it cannot go down even for a second. There's workarounds that we have, and it's probably going to be a bit of an involved process. But the main thing is to understand if you can turn off the writes, because if you can turn off the writes, this process becomes a lot easier. You can keep the reads going. There's no problem there, but it's really the writes that create the inconsistency that I'm talking about. So that's the main thing. I think schema changes is another one. So, since you're migrating, this is a really good opportunity to do schema changes. If you've decided that, like, hey, look, it'd be great if we had a couple other fields here, or, I really don't like the name of this particular field. Let's change it to something else. This is another good opportunity to do that as well. And I think those are the two main ones is making sure that their production environment is definitely still up and running. And if they want to make any changes, this is a really good time to do it.
So then what about index building? Is it going to be the same experience with like, if they picked a particular index, or is it going to be faster, slower? Is there or nothing? Like what's actually happening?
Yeah, again, that's another abstraction that I think, sometimes causes a little bit of anxiety. In Zilliz, you get one type. It's the cardinal index type, and the actual index build process is also abstracted for you as well. So it's just constantly building in the background as you're ingesting data, as you're doing upserts. And it's not anything that you have to worry about. We do have consistency types for writes if that is something that you're interested in tuning. The default is bounded, but there's a lot of levers that you can pull, but it's obviously a lot less than you would get if you were on Milvus, which is obviously infinitely customizable. So yeah, for the most part, users don't really have to worry about recreating the index or re-indexing data like as it's being written. That's just handled for you in the background now. That's not something that you have to worry about.
And then what's been in your experience like the largest migration from Milvus that you've worked on, just so that we can help reduce the anxiety for a lot of people? Because I get
Yeah.
anxious about migrating all the time.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's very fair concern. I think the main thing is to keep both of them up at the same time. So after the migration is complete, and we've done hundreds of millions, billions in the past. The main thing is about the rights. So if we want to keep both of them up, just so that your production application isn't crashing. And then once the data is fully migrated into Zilliz, we want to point a portion of the production traffic to Milvus and portion of the production traffic to Zilliz and make sure that's behaving okay. We can do load testing as well at that time to make sure that we're getting the performance that we need. And like I mentioned earlier, if there's a specific recall versus latency trade-off that you've made in the past, we want to make sure that Zilliz either meets or exceeds that. And most of the time it does. It's very good. It's definitely a lot better than what's out there right now. So most of the time we don't really run into too many issues here. The exception would probably be if you have like if you're pinned to the wall and you're like I need like 99.999% recall, then that's obviously this is a different story. But for the vast majority of use cases, most customers see an instant improvement in both latency and recall and efficiency, meaning that they're able to store more vectors in less compute. For they're able to store more vectors for less money, and their performance goes up and their concurrency goes up, and they don't have to manage everything. So it's a really great experience for a lot of folks who come from Milvus, and they're like, wow, this is great because I don't have to manage everything. Everything is cheaper. And everything is faster. So it's like a triple whammy of experiences for people. So they really appreciate that.
Now, the UI for migration looks really simple and really straightforward to me. Now, Do you recommend that people just do this on their own, or should they reach out to one of the solution architects? And because I mean, there's no service fee, right? There's no pro serve.
No, no, no,
Does it
no.
make sense for people to just do it on their own, or should they engage with you, one of the solution architects, beforehand to kind of like, step through some of these best practices that you talked
Yeah, I
about?
mean, if you're working with an account executive on our side, like obviously we'll be involved. So, there's no cost to you, right? So obviously, leverage the solutions team, and myself, and the rest of my team. We're always here to help you guys make sure that the experience is as smooth as possible. And there's a lot of nuances, there's a lot of gotchas, and we just want to make sure that like you're following what we believe to be the best practice, and we want you to have a really good migration experience. I know this is a very, anxiety-inducing time, and we want to make sure that it's as worry-free for you as possible, and we're always here for you to make sure that that is the case.
Can we go back to the slide that showed the compute types?
Yes.
So usually when I, look on when I think about these kind of, offers from a company, the only thing that I, think about is, oh, they're going to get more money from you. That's why, they have these different plans. My natural inclination is always just to go to the cheapest. But when you were talking, it sounds like it's more than just cost savings, like direct cost savings. It sounds like there's actually some indirect cost savings with these different price plans. So, it sounds to me that it's really important that before you just kind of go into it, really think about your use case and look at these requirements. How, what are some ways that they can, besides, reading the docs, what are some other ways that they can determine, what is the right CU type for them? What tools do we have available to them? Like, what do you recommend?
Um, So yeah, I mean it's a lot. It's highly dependent on your budget, what kind of performance and concurrency that you're looking for. If you're working with our team, we'll talk this through with you, just to make sure you're making the right choice for your requirements. So it's really great if you come to us with what your requirements will be. Sometimes that's not possible, which we totally understand. But if you come to us with, hey, here's exactly what I'm trying to do. Here's the traffic that I am anticipating. Here's the amount of time that I have to respond without having it be a terrible user experience. Like these are all like here's the amount of data I'm trying to embed. Here's the embedding model I'm using. These are all pieces of information that are critical to understanding like which bucket you want to pick here. And it might be that you choose more than one. It might be that you have one cluster that's capacity and one cluster that's performance. That we see that all the time, and extended as well. So I think we have a lot of documentation, like you mentioned, online that help you make this trade-off for yourself, and all the characteristics are in our documentation. But definitely leverage our team. We'll work with you to understand very deeply like what it is that you're trying to do, and we'll make the best solution recommendation based on what we believe to be the best practice. And then also we have a pricing calculator as well that's public that you can just play with all day long, and it'll tell you exactly how much everything costs, and how many CUs of performance will cost this, and how many CUs of capacity will cost this, and then you can kind of like figure out what fits for your budget.
And so, I mean, this is going to sound maybe a little ridiculous, but it's not like we're going to just always say go to performance optimize because we're going to make more money, and we're not. I mean, we're
No,
that's just not the what we're trying to do here, right?
no, our job as a solutions group is to create the best solution for you. And that might mean Zilliz is not the right product, by the way, which, I'm very honest with folks about that as well. If we can't do what it is that you're trying to do, I'm very honest with about that. We obviously are heavily optimized for hyperscale vector ANN use cases, and we're world class at that. And if that is not something that will solve your problem, then I'm very honest about that. But even within our own product SKUs, we want to make sure that you understand all of the trade-offs. And if you want to go with something against our advice, that's also fine too. Like we just want to make sure that you understand the trade-offs of each of these products, and make sure that you're making an informed decision as to like is this going to work for me, and am I going to be successful? Because our job is to make you successful, right? Regardless of which product you choose, we want you to be successful in your deployments, and that's really our number one goal.
And even if you just stay with Milvus too, I think that's okay with us as well.
Yeah, I mean, like, so like there's a lot of there's a lot of use cases where, I have a team, I know what I'm doing, I'm very familiar with the Milvus code base, like we've been studying it for many years. We're really excited about what you guys are launching in the future. We like the infinitely customizable nature of being open source, and that's where we want to stay. That's fine. Like we have tons of customers that are like that, and there's no problem. Like it's going to be there for you. But I think the a lot of the benefits of moving to a managed service is you get access to us, and more importantly, it's this part of your stack kind of disappears. Like it's just there, it's working. You don't have to worry about it. It's not something that you have to constantly worry about and tune and make sure it's working properly, so that you can build many levels of abstraction on top of the vector database and create the user experiences that you want to create. And that's honestly what's important to your users and to your customers, right? So this is just an implementation detail that helps you get there. But if we can help you guys, create the experiences that you want to create, and it just works in the background, you don't have to worry about it, and it fits into your budget, like that's the best case scenario for us.
So last week we talked to James about Milvus 2.6. So typically when can, our users see the 2.6 capabilities come into Zilliz Cloud?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we generally release the Milvus versions first, which I think kind of confuses some people. But the reason why we do that is we release the newest version of Milvus to open source so that it can be battle tested by everyone. And it's kind of like a quasi like QA process where like we basically just want to make sure that it is battle tested, it's working, it's performing properly, it's behaving the way that we expect, while we do our own internal QA on bringing those features to Zilliz, because like I said, Zilliz it shares a lot of the Milvus underlying architecture, but it is a completely different product and it has a lot of completely different code bases, a lot of different features. So kind of moving all of those features and implementing them into Zilliz Cloud is a maybe 3 month process or so. So generally, that's the lead time that we shoot for. Is if Milvus 2.6 is out in January, Zilliz will have all of those features in April. So that's generally the lead time that we see. And again, it's so that Zilliz is a commercial product. We have SLAs attached to it. There's just a certain level of expectation that is just different from Milvus as an open source project. So, there's just an additional layer of QA that we want to perform, before we kind of ship that in the Zilliz product.
Does that cause any problems for migration, that Delta? Have you seen any of that?
No, not really. A lot of the stuff, I mean, the team's pretty good at making most of the stuff like backwards compatible, like unless there's some feature that you're using in Milvus 2.6 and Zilliz doesn't support it yet. That's why it's important to basically be in communication with us, and make sure that you're not doing something that would be breaking. But for the most part, I haven't really seen that too much. I mean, occasionally, like there might be some schema features or something that is only available in the new Milvus version, and it's just not available in Zilliz yet. And if you try to migrate that to Zilliz, it's not going to work. It's not going to be happy. So yeah, definitely don't do that. But for the most part, it is. I think James does a pretty good job of making a lot of this stuff backwards compatible.
And then are there, like, besides the auto tuning, the auto index, the things that these different offers, are there any like other features, maybe security features, compliance features that are different with Zilliz Cloud?
I mean, in Milvus, the security apparatus is really your responsibility. So again, it's one of those things that you just is up to you. If you're going to encrypt things at rest, that's your responsibility. There's just Milvus is just the database product, right? So how it ends up being implemented in your infrastructure is totally up to you. I think from a security standpoint, we have a SOC 2. If you're interested in that, there's definitely a lot of standard kind of operating procedure stuff that's in there that I think is very helpful. It's for InfoSec teams. Private link, like I mentioned earlier, very, very common, very popular, just to make sure that, if you are using the managed service product, It's the traffic between your microservice and Zilliz Cloud is not going over the open internet. And I think where we see the most security scrutiny is definitely in the BYOC products. That one definitely is an ongoing negotiation between us and the customer, making sure that they're comfortable with the telemetry and the logging that we're getting back. And ultimately it's their cluster, so they can shut that off at any time. It's really up to them. But we just want to basically make sure that they understand they might it might hinder our ability to support them, and as long as they're okay with that trade-off, that's fine. But the main thing is the sovereignty is definitely on your side. So we do see that a lot. There are a lot of folks that like that model from a sovereignty and security standpoint.
Excellent. All right, I don't see any questions, but if anybody has any questions for Jay, please pop them into the Q&A or the chat panel. So we'll just keep lines open for just maybe 2 more minutes. So Jay, like I said in the beginning, you do this a lot. You talk to a lot of Milvus users about, possibly moving over to Zilliz Cloud. Just maybe like, I don't know, some sage advice to our audience about, what should they consider? I know you've covered a lot, but really, what would be like, 2 or 3 things that you really want to stress?
Um, I think the managed service model is not a new model. It's definitely something that's been around for a long time. We're not the first ones to do this. So, you just make sure that that is something that you want to implement into your stack. I know vendor lock-in is definitely a big concern for a lot of people in that respect. So, if that is something that you're concerned about, definitely definitely keep that in mind. It's not to say that like you can't move your data off of Zilliz Cloud or in BYOC. It's fairly straightforward to do. But I would say like overall, there are positive and minus traits to all these things. Like everything is just a trade-off in all of these scenarios. So think deeply about what it is that you're trying to do. Like what are your priorities? What is your team's overall capability? Like how much resource do you have to look at this? How important is this to your stack? How important is this to the user experience that you're trying to deliver? Those are all the types of like high level questions that you should be asking before you're because I'm not saying like one is better than the other. Like obviously there's a lot of benefits to Zilliz, but if you need something that's infinitely customizable, like Milvus run the code is open, you can do whatever you want, you can fork it, you can change it, you can do whatever you need to do, and a lot of customers do that, and that's one of the benefits that you get from being open source. But if that's not something that is in your capability, or that's not something that you want to be worrying about, or it's not something that is a core competency of your organization, and to be honest, like it's a lot of folks they do it because it's interesting to them, and I think that's great. I think it's an amazing thing that teams are taking Milvus, they're forking it, they're doing all of these really interesting, great things. But is that really what your organization should be working on? I think is a good question to ask. And a lot of times, they're doing it because it's fun and it's great and it's interesting, which is awesome. But I think understanding like, okay, well, can we like possibly divert those resources to something else that we could be creating even better customer experience or better user experiences if we weren't tinkering with this and we just let Zilliz and team kind of run this for us and kind of leverage a lot of the optimizations and improvements that we've made, while at the same time does that does the level of abstraction hinder your ability to deliver that experience? So I think those are the levers that you want to consider, and I think really think deeply about them, because a lot of people kind of flop into this area of very, very technical. You need to understand like very innately like all these components and how they interact with each other, and all the different levers that you can pull. Without like fully understanding what that means. Like this is like a full-time job, like for somebody to look at this all day long. And is that something that you want to invest in as your priority, and weigh that with your total cost of ownership?
I mean, just like you've been saying the whole time, these are all about trade-offs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's completely up to you. Well, Jay, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wise knowledge on the differences between Zilliz Cloud and Milvus. And we hope that everyone who joined us enjoyed that as well. If you would like to speak to Jay directly, you can, just let us know. We can connect you. He's also on Discord, of course, LinkedIn, all the social media touch points, and he's a great resource. So, make sure that if you want to learn more, want to get into the details, reach out to Jay. I think he's fantastic.